This video doesn't contain reviewing the DLCs. Resident Evil Village is famous for its similarities to Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 4, but the game itself doesn't contain the fun elements that those games have. And in this video, I'm going to discuss and detail every one of them. This video contains spoilers. If you didn't finish the game, I encourage you to do that and then watch this video. First of all, the elements that look similar with Resident Evil 7 is the first person mode. But in the Resident Evil 7 or even Resident Evil 2, there are a lot of puzzles, and that puzzles are fun, and they're getting harder when you go through the game. The more much you get experience, the puzzles get harder. But it's not the case in Resident Evil 8. In Resident Evil 8, there are some puzzles, but the majority of them are in the Host Bonaviento section. And after that, or I better say, except that part, the rest of the game doesn't have any promising puzzle, and the puzzles are way too easy, and most of the times are one way to solve the puzzle, meaning that in the previous Resident Evils you have to explore and find out where you should go, but in this one you always have the key of the one door and you eventually go to that door. And the game looks like it's not a one-way game, but it is. You have only one way to finish the game. It's very linear. People may say, but the game is combat focused, but it's not. The combat has many problems, especially in the story mode. One of the major problems is that combat encounters are very rare in this game. There are almost 2 castle sections, and another one is when the game is about to finish and you became Chris. Other than those 2, and another one at the beginning of the game when you found shotgun. Other than 3 of those, there are no combat encounters that are really tough and fun. And there are some details that makes Resident Evil 4 perfect and Resident Evil Village not. I'm going to discuss every one of them. For a start, I'm going to talk about inventory. Resident Evil Village inventory is very similar to Resident Evil 4 inventory, but the Resident Evil 4 has a smaller inventory, and you have to be careful with what you're gonna carry. In Resident Evil Village, it's not the case. Almost every time you can carry anything you want, and your inventory never gets full. Maybe it's because the items that you combine together aren't go to the, maybe because the items you combine together, they will not go to your inventory. Instead, they are below and you can see them, but they doesn't get any space and you can always carry them. And for example, if you wanna use a herb, you can always carry it without even having to worry about it getting your inventory space. And when you want to use a healing item, you can use. And another thing I want to talk about is the merchant. The merchant gives you some options, but it's not like the Resident Evil 4. In Resident Evil 4, you have 4 options for your pistols, and all of them have some advantages and disadvantages. But in this game, the more you grow through the game, the better pistols opens up for you, whether you find it or buy it from merchant. And at the middle of the game, you have no options like the way you have in the Resident Evil 4 to choose from the pistols and to choose which one do you like to upgrade. In this game, your options are very limited. You can't upgrade one of your guns to max out if you wanna finish the game easily. The thing that is not present in Resident Evil Village is choose to how you finish the game or with which gun you want to play the game. The options are very limited. And for example, I say the pistols are very limited and the shotguns are also limited, and it's not like the Resident Evil 4, which you have the TMP, an automatic gun, which is very fast and change your style of the playing the game. The combining items isn't that fun because the elements that make the healing item and the elements that make the bullets are completely different. And only one time you get to choose which way you want to consume your elements is because it's for the grenade launcher bullets or rounds. And other than that, you always use the items for healing and items for bullets. And it's somewhat pointless because you have the two element and you will eventually build the one. But in the Resident Evil 7, you have to choose. You can use your chem fluid for the guns or for the healing item. And it was all you have to always think about how you're gonna consume your inventory stuff and how you wanna make sure that your inventory isn't going to get full. So it's a downside in comparison with Resident Evil 7 when you think about the combining stuff. The most disappointing thing about Resident Evil Village or 8 is its difficulties. In Resident Evil 4, when you finish the game, you can go another round with infinity ammo guns, but on the same difficulty. In Resident Evil 5, you can go through the game when you finish the game. For example, on easy, you can go to the professional difficulty or veteran difficulty with infinity ammo. But the thing is, finish the veteran difficulty, the game unlocks you professional difficulty. And in that difficulty, infinity ammo is not makes the game easy. It's just makes it fair. And it's in the Resident Evil 7, when you finish the game on normal, it will give you a gun named Albert 07, I think, and it's a very powerful weapon. But the game doesn't get easy. It's hard, but with that gun, you are going to make the game somewhat fair. It's harder than normal, but with that gun, some of the parts became easier, and it's very fun to finish. But in the Resident Evil 8, when you finish the game, you access to infinity guns and you can make every gun infinite. And the game doesn't become that hard. If you want to finish it with the infinity guns, it gets easy. I'm talking about Shadows of the Village difficulty. When you finish the game on the hardest difficulty, another difficulty opens up, and that's the difficulty I'm going to talk about. And the problem with that is when you use your infinity ammo and good guns, the game became easy. And when you don't want to use them and use your default weapons, the game becomes way too hard that it's almost impossible to finish it. And another difference that exists between Resident Evil 7 and 8 is that in Resident Evil 7, some puzzles are going to change when you change the difficulty. But it's not the case for Resident Evil Village. And Resident Evil always have a new difficulty that changes the game and makes it much more fun. But it's not the case for Resident Evil Village. The difficulty it's harder, and when you unlock it, you will see enemies that you don't see in the previous difficulties. But it's not fun. it's the same way you play the game that you will play on the other difficulties. And like I said, the most one of the most important combat encounters is when you became the Kiris. But the disappointing thing about that is you have no weapon choice. You always get the same weapons. And for the game that says it has a promising merchant, you think so. I'm going to upgrade my weapons for the second playthrough very well, and I'm going to have much more fun. But when you play the second playthrough, you will see that the most combat encounters doesn't allow you to use your new weapons, and you will always have to make it just like the previous one. And I found this one very disappointing. I prefer to Chris gets the Ethan's weapon somehow, or the game doesn't change Ethan's to Chris for that part. Or if they want to you to play it as Chris, they can make it somewhat different than not that just like the way it is now. The way that you will always through your playthrough upgrading the Ethan's weapons, buying items for him, and the most important section of the game for combat, you will get rid of all of your inventory and items and everything you make throughout the game. And for this section, it's about this. Until now, I only criticized Resident Evil Village, but I'm going to say good things about this game too. The fundamentals of the combat are great. I mean, when I play the Mercenaries mode, I can see the enemies are interesting and there are interesting things about combat. Like with the flash rounds of the grenade launcher, you can stun the enemies. And when you stun the enemies, you can kill them with the pistol easily. It's a great way to using your bullets smartly. And Mercenaries is much fun. Unlike the other games, when you die in the Mercenaries mode, your score doesn't matter anymore. In this game, it matters, and you can get the SSS rank on the Mercenaries mode without even finishing it completely. You have to get the good combos and good score for that. And it's weird because when you play the Mercenaries mode and you play with the enemies and test what enemies are weaknesses and strongest, you will find out that the game is very promising fundamentals and the core of the game is very powerful, but they're not implemented and make the combat in the story mode as fun as it is in the Mercenaries mode. And from that, I appreciate the game because I hate the story mode and I love the Mercenaries mode because they can make the game very well. The game story, it's like just you always, there are four lords. Lady Dimitrescu is the first one, then you go to the host Bonaviento, then you go to the Moreo, and the last one is Heisenberg. And interestingly, in the Heisenberg sections, there are many enemy varieties. And combat encounters on that section are very different than the rest of the game. If or I can choose to change something in that game, I make it different on linear. I mean, everyone blamed that game for when you found the first flask, the game will show you to find the rest. And when I talk about this game through with my friends, all of them say that that part was very bad and I feel like it's a video game. Before then I feel like it's the adventure, but after I'm the game says found the rest parts, I feel like it's the video game and it's not that good. If I have to choose that make that game, or if I want to make that game good, I change two of the things. First of all, I make enemy encounters a little bit more, and I make the puzzles last for almost all of the game. And another change that I feel like make the game very better right off the with a little change is that instead of you going to the lords in a linear way, you choose to where you go. For example, you became you became after that the villagers are dead, you will go to the duke, and duke said to you that our four lords exist, and you will choose. You can go to the Heisenberg first, or the Lady Dimitrescu second, or any of order that you want. And I feel like it makes the game very better. And I feel like they can also have this mode when you finish the game. For example, a professional difficulty that doesn't force you to go in a certain way. You get to choose where you want to go. And another change I going to make is that the Chris parts became very different. For example, after Ethan's death, you get his weapons, and Ethan's deaths become the part where he dies for the first time, not for the second time when everything explodes. And I feel like this is the better way of finishing it, because in the last part they came, they get back Ethan from the death and kill him again. And for me, it's very disrespecting, and it's weird that on the last part of the game they have the same goal as the Heisenberg, but they decide to kill each other instead of teaming up with each other and then kill the Miranda. They can say just like, I mean, Ethan can say to Heisenberg, I will go for the Miranda, and if I don't succeed, you can have the baby, because it's it if it if Ethan doesn't succeed, her baby is Miranda's, and there is no point in fighting Heisenberg. And here I wanna tell why the other Resident Evils were better. From 0 to 3, all the Resident Evils have very good puzzles, especially Resident Evil 0. That game isn't very popular, but puzzles are very good. From Resident Evil 4 to 5, they are good action games. And like I said, they have good hard difficulties that are very fun to play after you finish the game. And then we have the Resident Evil 6, which is arguably, many people says that it's the worst one, but it's not. When you look at back and you see it's a good action game, nobody says Resident Evil 6 is a bad game. Everyone says Resident Evil 6 is a bad Resident Evil. But the game features co-op mode. You can play as Chris, as Leon, as Jake, Wesker's son, and as Ada. And all of the campaigns became two-player mode, co-op. And the game has a good story mode. It's not very good or anything brilliant, but it's better than Resident Evil 8, and it's much more, and it's make much more sense. And the other Resident Evil is Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7, it's very complicated game and fun. The only downside of the game is that it has less enemy variety, but the game is very clean. the first section of the game reminds people of the what the first Resident Evils are was to be, and the last part of the game became an action when you have the automatic gun and you will face many enemies and you will kill most of them. And it's very fun because at the start of the game you are very weak, you have weak weapons, but at the end of the game you have the good weapons, and the game has very interesting puzzles. And when I see all of the Resident Evils, I say the Resident Evil Village was the worst one because it doesn't have any interesting puzzles and it doesn't have any interesting combat and a story. And unlike most of the Resident Evil games, it doesn't have a difficulty that are fun to play when you finish the game. It's the only Resident Evil without replay value. And the remakes Resident Evil, I want to mention Resident Evil 2 remake was very popular and everyone liked that game. And Resident Evil 3 wasn't that good because most of the players that did finish the Resident Evil 3 original found it very short and they cut many of the bosses, and the Jill character wasn't the Jill she used to be, but the game itself was fun. And after finishing the game, the items will unlock for you, but the game is still challenging, unlike the Resident Evil Village. With Resident Evil 3 remake, when you have the Infinity Launcher, the game isn't as easy as Resident Evil Village becomes when you have the Infinity Ammo and the Magnums. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoy, and leave a comment if you are agree or disagree. I'm glad to hear your opinion.